Hello friends, it's Kristie Marcotte. Jaded Blossom has a fun new mini Firefighter release. Jaded Blossom has so many fun ideas. Sometimes they have too many products to fit in their regular release, so they will have a mini release. This month they have their mini Firefighter release. There's a new sentiment stamp set called Sound the Alarm, and there are coordinating outline dies. Lots of really fun sentiments. Sound the alarm, it's your birthday. Thankful for heroes who rise to the occasion. Thank you, first responders. Thanks for being a lifesaver, Gnome. You ablaze me, and several other fun sentiments. There's a new car add-on set called Firetruck. And you can use this set to create a fun fire truck that the gnomes and some of their pet friends can ride in. Now the Firetruck is an add-on set. You will need the original off-road vehicle set, since the Firetruck set does not include the wheels or part of the frame of the vehicle. And I will show you how to assemble the Firetruck later on in the video, since I have several cards to share using the new mini release. The final die set is a new gnome add-on set called Firefighter. It includes the Firefighter helmet, there's a fire hydrant, a hose, an adorable little dog that you can make a Dalmatian since it has all the tiny spots. There's also a fire extinguisher and an axe. So your firefighter will be all ready to go to battle some fires. If you're interested in any of the products from the new mini release, I do have links in the description box below. And I also have 4 cards to share using the new mini release. For 2 of the cards, I'm using pattern paper from Echo Park's First Responder collection. I thought this would be perfect for some firefighter cards. So let's go ahead and get started with card number 1. This card features 1 sheet of pattern paper from the First Responders paper collection. I'm using the front and back side. For the background of the card, I'm using the pattern paper that has the fire department emblem on it. The reverse side of the paper has lots of different firefighter images. The background piece is 4 inches by 5 1/4 inches. And the narrow strip is 2 inches by 5 1/2 inches. I'm layering both of those pieces on some charcoal colored cardstock. I'll put ATG tape on the back and add my card front onto a card base, leaving 1/8 of an inch of the white card base showing. The strip on the left side does go all the way to the edge of the card base. I also put a narrow strip of the pattern paper on the inside of the card just for some extra detail. Now it's time to assemble the first Firefighter gnome. I am using the tool add-on set that has the overalls and the boots. Thought this firefighter needed a pair of overalls. I cut out the background piece of the overalls from some red cardstock, and the only area you'll see is the shirt. The rest of it will be covered up. Use some bright yellow cardstock for the overalls, black cardstock for the boots. Just layer both of those pieces on the background piece. Also use the same yellow cardstock for the suspenders of the overalls. I have all of my die cut pieces stored in one of scrapbook.com's stack and sort trays. These are perfect so you don't lose all your tiny little die cuts. Next, I'll assemble the hat. I used white cardstock for the background piece. All of that will be covered up. I'm using the same yellow cardstock color I used for the overalls for the hat. Just glue the 2 pieces on. For the firefighter emblem on the hat, I use white cardstock for that background piece and orange cardstock for the little flame. Now for the boy gnomes, you never actually see their head. They have their beard, mustache, nose, and then they're always wearing a hat. And generally their beards cover up their entire body, but with some of the new add-on sets like the overalls, you do have other options. On the tool add-on set, there's also a shorter beard, and that's what I'm using for this gnome. I first attached the body onto the hat. Now I'll add the beard on top. Next, I'll adhere the mustache. And the gnome really starts to come together once you add the nose. And I did pop up the nose using some thin foam dimension. The tool add-on set also has the option of arms, and I thought about using them, so I did cut them out from red cardstock. But once I adhered the fire extinguisher in front of the gnome, I decided the arms wouldn't work. For the fire extinguisher, I cut out that background piece from some white cardstock, and there is the one option where it has the hand holds. So if you're not sure where to place the hands, Jaded Blossom usually has one of the images with the hand positions. For the tank of the fire extinguisher, I used some red iridescent cardstock, so it has this beautiful shine. For the top portion, I used some silver satin mirror cardstock. I used the same charcoal colored cardstock for the hose and black cardstock for the nozzle or that very end piece of the fire extinguisher. Next, I'll attach the hands. If you're looking for a good skin tone paper pad, Jaded Blossom does sell one in their shop. It's made by P13, and there are 6 different skin tone colors in the paper pad. So it's nice to have a variety of different skin tones. And I do have a link for the paper pad in the description box below. Now I'll flip over the fire extinguisher, put thin foam dimension on the back, and I will need to cut some fairly small pieces to fit behind some areas of the image. Then I'll remove the release paper and adhere the fire extinguisher in front of the Gnome Firefighter. Since the background of my card is fairly busy, I will add the gnome on a Vellum Octagon die cut, and this die set is from Jaded Blossom. I was trying to decide if I wanted the gnome on the right or left side, still wanted to have enough space to add the sentiment. And I do end up putting the gnome on the left side. I'll also pop up the gnome using more thin foam dimension. This is scrapbook.com's 1mm foam, so it doesn't add a lot of extra dimension. Behind the die cut images that go off of the gnome's body, I am adding a second layer of dimension. Want to make sure it's all at the same level. Then I'll remove the release paper and add the gnome on the left side of the octagon die cut. I'll flip over the octagon, put glue on the back just behind the gnome image. Don't want any of that glue to show through on the vellum. Then I'll adhere the octagon on the card. For a sentiment, I've already stamped and cut out, "Thankful for heroes who rise to the occasion." I will put foam dimension behind this sentiment, mostly on the right side. I'm not adding any foam dimension on the left side where it sits on that pattern paper strip. And I'll adhere the sentiment in the upper right-hand corner. Before adhering it, I did add just a tiny bit of glue underneath the vellum octagon since I knew I would be covering it up with the sentiment. For embellishments, I cut out several stars using Jaded Blossom's Embellishment Cluster die set. I used some gold mirror cardstock that has a linen texture on it, and this is just cardstock from my stash. I always keep those small scraps of specialty cardstock since they're perfect for embellishments, especially with Jaded Blossom's new Embellishment Cluster die set. I'll put 3 stars underneath the sentiment on the right side and 2 in the lower left-hand corner next to the gnome. And underneath a few of the stars, I am lifting up the vellum octagon and putting a small drop of glue. That way there are a few more areas of the octagon die cut that are adhered down, and you won't be able to see that glue since it's behind some of the die cut pieces. For a final finishing touch, I'll use a white gel pen and add a few highlights on the Firefighter gnome. So there is my finished card, and this is card number 1. I love how this card turned out. I think the overalls from the tool add-on set work perfectly for a firefighter. Now moving on to card number 2. I'll start by assembling another Firefighter gnome, although this one's not wearing the overalls. I use white cardstock for that background piece of the gnome, and all of that will either be cut off or covered up. This gnome is blonde, so I have a blonde beard and a blonde mustache. I'm assembling a red Firefighter helmet. Most of the gnome's hat match that top curve of the gnome's beard, but some of them do go behind like this one. So I will need to cut off the hat on the background piece. This is the traditional gnome hat. The gnome will have black boots, and I will pop them up with some foam dimension. After I've cut off that background hat piece, I'll put glue on the back portion of the beard and adhere the gnome on the hat. Next, I'll attach the mustache. Then finally add the nose, and I did pop it up with some foam dimension. This gnome Firefighter is a lot shorter than the gnome Firefighter on my first card. The gnome will be holding the hose. I cut out the background piece from some light gray cardstock, and I am using the die cut image that has the hand holds. With some of the images that the gnomes hold, it does get a little confusing where to place their hands. So for the fire extinguisher and the hose, I am using the piece that has the handholds. Using the same light gray cardstock for the hose, charcoal colored cardstock for the nozzle, and light blue cardstock for the water coming out of the hose. Before attaching the hands, I did put a small piece of foam dimension just on the back area. The fingers will be able to sit right on the die cut image. Now I'll flip over the hose, and I will pop it up using more foam dimension, cutting some small pieces to fit behind the narrow hose. Then I'll remove the release paper and put the hose in front of the gnome. There was the one little water piece. Wasn't sure at first if it was supposed to sit on top of the water that's attached to the hose, but it is supposed to be separate. And I will show how I place that little water droplet later on the card. After removing all the release paper, I'll adhere the hose in front of the gnome. For the background of my card, I've already assembled it. I did this a couple months ago for another Jaded Blossom card, and I ended up not using it. The very background I ink blended with some blue Distress Oxide ink, and at the bottom I used some Doodlebug Design petite print pattern paper that I cut out using a scallop border die from Jaded Blossom. Even though I didn't use the background for the video a few months ago, I still really liked it, so I set it aside to use in a future video, and when I was working on this set of cards, I knew it was perfect. I'll be adding one of their booths, and I've already assembled most of it. I inked up the edge of all of the boards using some Distress Oxide ink. On the back side of the booth, behind the sign and also the main portion of the booth, I am adding a strip of double-sided adhesive tape. And in those areas, I'm putting several flames. And the flame dies are from Jaded Blossom's Gnome S'more add-on die set. There are two different sizes, so I used two different shades of orange cardstock. I'll alternate the different flame pieces at the top of the booth. Try not to put the flames up too high. I still want the booth to be able to fit on an A2 size card and fit inside an envelope. Then I'll add more flames behind the little shelf area of the booth, and I do have some of the flames going behind the posts. To help secure all those flame die cut pieces, I'll add another strip of double-sided adhesive tape, and I will be popping up the booth using foam dimension from scrapbook.com. This is more of their 1mm foam in the 1/4 inch roll. I'll make sure to get good coverage on the back of the booth, and I'll also cut some narrow strips of foam to put behind the posts. I'll remove the release paper, put a little bit of glue behind the flames that don't have the foam dimension. Then I'll add the booth on the front of the card, and I'm placing it almost all the way to the very bottom. And you can see part of those top flames do go off the edge of the card, but I think it'll still fit inside an A2 size envelope. Next, I'll add the Firefighter gnome in front of the booth. First, I'll pop him up using more foam dimension. Then I'll remove the release paper and put the Firefighter gnome in the lower left-hand corner. Even though the flames are orange and his helmet is red, there isn't a lot of contrast separating the two, so I think it would have been better if I'd gone with a black helmet instead of the red helmet. But I still like how the card turned out. Now I'll add that tiny little droplet, and I decided I would pop it up with some foam dimension. So I'm cutting a teeny tiny piece of foam. And I'll adhere it right next to the water spray coming out of the hose, and I think I put it upside down. I think that little pointed part of the droplet should have been the other direction. I'm also tucking in just a tiny piece of foam dimension underneath that top portion of the water since I noticed it was dipping down. For a sentiment, I've already stamped and cut this out. Thank you, first responders. I used brown ink on craft cardstock, and I also added a little extra ink along the edge of the sentiment. I did pop it up with some foam dimension and adhered it on the top of the booth. To add the look of nails inside those tiny holes on the booth, I'm using a silver gel pen. And I'll also use a white gel pen to add highlights on the Firefighter gnome, the water, the hose, and also the flames. Several of the sentiments on the new Sound the Alarm stamp set are perfect if you're giving cards to first responders. You could write a thank you message inside the card and drop it off at your local fire station. I still had 2 more flames that I cut out, and I debated about putting them in the lower right-hand corner. I even put glue on the back of one of the fire pieces, but then I decided it was awfully close to the poor little Firefighter gnome, so I didn't add the last 2 fire pieces. For a final finishing touch, I'm adding 2 small gold stars on the right and left side of the sentiment at the top of the booth. And these are just leftover stars that I cut out for the previous card. So the nice thing about the Embellishment Cluster die set, you can quickly cut out lots of paper embellishments with the die since there are 6 images all welded together. So 1 pass through your die cut machine, you have 6 embellishment pieces. For card number 3, the pattern paper is from Doodlebug Designs' Doggone Cute collection. I have the teal and white polka dot paper for the background, and at the very bottom I'm adding a little grassy hill, and this is the tone-on-tone grass pattern paper that's included in the paper pad. I cut it out using Jaded Blossom's Border die set number 2. And on the very background I'm also adding a Vellum Scallop Rectangle die cut. I tucked the very bottom of the Scallop Rectangle behind the grassy piece, and for now the rest of that vellum piece is loose, but don't worry, it will be attached once I add the rest of the card pieces. I layered the background piece on some white shimmer cardstock, then put the card front onto a card base. Now I'll start assembling the 2 die cut images that will be featured on the card. I have the dog, little Dalmatian, and also the fire hydrant. Just to save time on the video, I've already inked up the edges of all of the fire hydrant pieces. I used Distress Oxide Scorched Timber ink color. Now I'll attach all the individual pieces of the fire hydrant on that background outline piece. And I used the same red cardstock for everything except that small circle at the very front. Now you could always eliminate a few of the pieces if you don't want all those extra layers, since everything still has that stitch detail, but I think by adding each individual piece, it gives the die cut image more detail. Now I'll start assembling the dog, and this image is the same way. You could leave off some of the die cut pieces. In fact, I actually did leave off one of the muzzle pieces. I use white cardstock for almost all of the pieces of the dog. I started with the very background layer, first adhered the body, then I'll add the collar. Next I'll add the head, and this piece has the ears and the head. Then I'll add the individual head, the individual ears. I use blue cardstock for the dog's collar. Now I'll add the little muzzle piece. Next, I'll attach the spot that goes around one of the eyes, and I forgot that I did cut this one out 2 times. First, I used some dark charcoal cardstock, and then I had changed my mind when I was prepping and wanted to use a lighter gray cardstock. But at this point in the video, I forgot that I have that lighter gray piece. I use a light pink cardstock for the dog's nose. Now I'll attach the front legs, and then the 2 individual front paws. And I also attach that individual piece for the dog's tail. Once the dog is fully assembled, it does end up to be at least 3 or 4 layers thick. And here's where I realized I used the wrong color spot to go around the eye. I was able to remove it mostly. I know you can still see some of the paper that's dried on the white cardstock, but I was able to cover it up using the light gray spot. So no one will know I used the wrong color and had to remove it. For the tag on the collar, I cut it out from some silver holographic cardstock. I'll just glue that in place. It adds just that tiny bit of shine. For the dog's eyes, they are very small. I'll first add a tiny drop of Barely Art glue, then I'll pick up those eye die cut pieces using scrapbook.com's Craft Pro Pick tool. I'm using the wax tip. Since this dog will be a Dalmatian, I cut out all the teeny tiny little spots. There is one die that cuts out 5 spots, and I cut it out twice, so I have 10 little spots I can add on the little dog. Now some of those spots are super tiny. If you don't want to deal with tiny little die cut pieces, you could always just use a black marker and add spots randomly on your little dog. And the fun thing about the little dog image, you don't have to make it a Dalmatian. You could use other colors, you could leave off the spots completely, lots of different options. The little dog image is very cute. And this dog image is larger and looks different than the dog image on the Bicycle and Friends die set. So it's fun to have some different options. So there is my Dalmatian all assembled. I'll flip over the dog and also the fire hydrant, add some foam dimension on the back, and I'll be adding both of the images on the front of the card. Once I have good coverage with foam dimension, I'll remove the release paper. The fire hydrant will go on the right side and the Dalmatian will go on the left side of the card. Before adhering the images down, I'll first add the sentiment. And the sentiment is from Jaded Blossom's Doggone Awesome stamp set. I thought this sentiment was perfect to feature both the dog and the fire hydrant. Some days you're the dog, and some days you're the fire hydrant. Keep your head up. I stamped it on some light blue cardstock, and currently this stamp set does not have a coordinating die set. So I simply trim down the sentiment piece. I'll adhere it in the upper left-hand corner. Before adhering it down, I did put a little bit of glue underneath the Scallop Vellum Rectangle. Just wanted to have more areas where that vellum piece is attached. Then I added the 2 die cut images on the front. For embellishments, I'm adding 3 small blue iridescent heart die cuts. And I cut these out using the Embellishment Cluster die set. I'll put 2 underneath the sentiment on the left side and 1 above the fire hydrant on the right side. Now moving on to card number 4, and I'll be assembling the new fire truck. As I mentioned earlier, you will need the off-road vehicle die set. From that set, I cut out the very background piece, so it's the main body of the off-road vehicle, the 2 tires, and also the rear view mirrors. I did use some pattern paper for the fire truck. This is from Echo Park's First Responder collection. I'll start off by attaching the tires, and I used some charcoal colored cardstock for the tires. For that main front body of the fire truck, I'm adding it right underneath the frame of the front window. So I'll first add glue on that background piece, then attach the front portion of the fire truck. Now I'll add glue at the very bottom of that piece and attach the bumper. And I cut this out using some silver satin mirror cardstock. To give the opening of the front window some separation, there is a die image in the new fire truck set. It looks like the capital letter I. I'll add glue on that top and lower portion and adhere it on the back side of the vehicle. So now it has that middle separation on the front window. Next, I'll attach the very top portion of the truck. It has the two lights and the ladder, and this piece attaches on the very back of that frame piece of the truck. I'll put glue on the back and adhere it in place. Next, I'll adhere the ladder, and I cut this out from some light gray cardstock. Now I'll attach the front grille of the truck, and I use some silver mirror cardstock. Did get a little bit of glue on that front piece, but it easily wipes away on the specialty cardstock. I use black cardstock for the steering wheel, and this piece is probably a little easier to attach if you put it on before that big front piece of the truck. Now I'll add all the different lights on the front of the truck. I use white shimmer cardstock for the two small circles and some of the tone-on-tone yellow pattern paper for the 4 rectangle pieces on the front. And these are fun since the rectangle pieces are slightly wonky. They're not perfectly cut rectangles. Now I'll adhere the lights at the top of the truck. I use silver satin mirror cardstock for the bottom of the light and red iridescent cardstock for the lights. This truck will have lots and lots of shine once it's assembled. The final pieces on the truck I'm adding are the rear view mirrors, and I cut these out from some silver mirror cardstock. I'll put some double-sided adhesive tape on the back side, then add the mirrors on the right and left side of the truck. So there is the fire truck all assembled. So fun. I will be popping it up with some foam dimension using scrapbook.com's 1/4 inch foam in the 1mm thickness. But before adding the foam, I remembered I need to put the gnome and its passenger in place. Luckily, I was still able to remove that foam piece. And now I'll add a strip of double-sided adhesive tape, and that'll help hold the gnome and its passenger in place. The gnome will be driving, and there'll be an adorable little Dalmatian sitting in the passenger seat. Since you won't see the bottom portion of the gnome, I didn't need to worry about his feet. And the same with the dog, I didn't need to worry about the bottom portion since you'll only see a little bit of the body and the dog's head. So after I attach the gnome and the dog, I'll flip over this piece and now put some foam dimension on the back. And I'll make sure to get good coverage so there isn't one area that sags. And I will need to cut some smaller foam pieces to fit behind certain areas of the fire truck. Now I'll remove the release paper. And I've already assembled the background of the card, used some pattern paper from Echo Park's First Responder collection. As you can see, the truck does fit perfectly on an A2 size card. It goes basically edge to edge. I'll adhere the truck closer toward the bottom. Want to leave enough room at the top for the sentiment. I did notice the right side of the ladder was lifted up slightly. So I'm putting a little bit of glue underneath and holding it onto the gnome's hat. I've already stamped and cut out the sentiment, "Gnome Doubt, You're My Hero." This would be another great card to drop off at your local fire station to say thank you. Now I'll attach the dog's paws, and I'm putting them on the very edge of the fire truck as if there's no window. I know there really would be a window there, but I think for this card, it looks cute to have the dog sort of leaning out of the window. I'll also attach the gnome's hands on the steering wheel, and I will put some foam dimension on the back side of the hands before attaching them. Using a white gel pen, I'll add a few highlights on the gnome and the fire truck. Then for final finishing touch, I'll add some of the heart embellishments in the upper left-hand corner. These were left over from the previous card. I used some blue iridescent cardstock, so they're super shiny. I'm using one of the larger hearts and two medium-sized hearts. Just put glue on the back and adhere them in place. So there is my finished card. I love how this turned out. The little dog is so cute, and I love the new fire truck for the gnomes to ride in. Now here's another look at the 4 cards I made using Jaded Blossom's brand new mini Firefighter release. This is a small release, but there are so many fun images and sentiments. If you are interested in any of the products I used in this video, I do have links in the description box below. Jaded Blossom never disappoints with their amazing releases. They offer a wide variety of unique and fun products. And if you weren't aware, all of their stamps, dies, and stencils are made here in the US. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day.